I'm going to show you a few different ways to go about sewing 90-degree corners or a more deep point. I'm going to show you the traditional way where we just sew it, clip the corner, and use a turning tool, or this nifty trick using a piece of thread. And I usually just grab a bright piece of thread, something that is going to really contrast from the fabric that I'm using so that it's really easy to find once it is turned. So first, let's start with a 90-degree corner. I'm just going to take these two rectangles and I'm going to sew down one side, do that corner, and then up to the other side. So I've stopped a 1/4 inch from this raw edge by looking at that little mark on my foot. So I'm going to raise my foot. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. This is the way most people do this. I'm going to do it a little bit different on this edge. I'm going to stop about 1 stitch short of a 1/4 inch. You have to go really slow. I'm going to lift my foot. I'm going to turn it 45 degrees, take 1 stitch, lift my foot, turn, and go. So now we have one that is just sewn straight and turned, and one that has 1 stitch at an angle. This time we're going to do the thread trick. So I'm going to take 2 pieces of thread, I don't know, about 8 inches long. I'm going to sew down. I'm going to stop about 1 stitch before I'm at a 1/4 inch. I'm going to raise my foot. Then I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to put it in between those 2 layers. So see how I'm flapping that up with the thread. Then I'm going to push that thread all the way back in and straighten it back out if you need to. And I'm going to pull so that I can feel that thread pushing against the needle. Now I'm going to take 1 stitch. That basically gets this yellow thread inside 1 stitch of this. Now I'm going to lift my foot, I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to make sure both sides of the thread, it's hard to show, I'm going to make sure both sides of the thread are well away from this 1/4 inch seam. Have them come out that side, and now I'm going to sew. Now I'm going to do the same thing with a second piece of thread on this corner. So putting it in between those 2 layers, pulling back, take 1 stitch, lift again, turn. Now this one is a little harder to get the threads inside because this side is already sewn, but you can do it. So I'm just going to lift this up, make sure both of these are tucked in and pulled over this way because we don't want them caught in any of the other stitches as we finish this side. Now I'm going to sew straight. So we have our rectangles. This is the one that we just did at a 90-degree turn. So I'm going to trim those corners. And I don't like to cut straight across like that. I like to come down from each side, making sure you leave a little bit of fabric past that point so that you're not going to break through it. But this creates less fabric that needs to fold into that pointed section. And I'm going to turn it right side out. I use my finger first to get that out as much as I can. And then I grab a turning tool or a pencil or a chopstick and very slowly and gently push at that corner and get that out as best I can. So I'm going to press that so we can really see how good of a job I did. You can see it's not a great point. It's a bit curved or flattened. So now let's see how the one where we did the 145-degree stitch does. Grab my turning tool, same process. So I have a good point, but you can tell it's got a little bit of fuzz because I actually went through the point. So that's not the best. Now here is the one that I did 2 sides with the thread. And this time we don't need the turning tool. We're just going to turn this right side out. And then I'm going to use the thread, making sure I grab both pieces so I'm not just pulling it out, to just kind of tug that corner out. And then when you're happy with that, you're just going to grab one side of the thread and pull it out. You can save these to use again. So we really do have our best points here. So turn these so all the points are together. So this is the one where we just sewed, pivoted, sewed. Definitely a curved point. This one, we did the 45-degree angle. It's a pretty good point, except when I used the turning tool to push that out, I went through the fabric, so that's not great. This one took a little bit more time on the sewing machine to add the thread, but was faster to turn, and it got great points and did not end up pulling the fabric out. For a 90-degree turn, you're definitely going to get your most professional results using that thread trick. Now let's see what happens with the angled like ribbon kind of edge. When you're sewing on such tight corners and not a 90-degree corner, sometimes it's hard to know when to turn your presser foot. It's harder to use the guides that are on those needles. So what I do is I take a ruler. Actually, I'm going to take this one because this blue is exactly 1/4 inch. And so what I will do is I will lay it down along those lines, and I'll take a pencil or a heat erasable pen and just draw. So when I'm sewing this way, I'll know when to get to the pivot point to stop with my needle down, lift my presser foot, and turn. So I will do it on both of those corners just to make life a little bit easier. This is great when you're teaching people to sew on any kind of an end, even if it's a 90-degree, but sometimes I still do it on these deep angles just to make sure I hit that point right. Now, because we're doing the thread method, I want to stop 1 stitch short of that line, which I think I am. I'm going to lift my foot, get my thread between those 2 pieces of fabric, and then I'm going to pull both hands back so that I can feel the thread on the needle. I'm going to take 1 stitch, lift my foot, turn, pull this right thread back and make sure it goes in between the other 2, pull up, and then we're just going to have that tucked back so that the needle shouldn't go through those threads again. We're going to stop 1 short of that next line. And we're going to do the same thing with this other piece of thread. So now I've done the 2 super pointy angles, and we're going to see how this goes. This is going to be a lot faster to turn with this tube turner. I have them from Dritz. I'm using the 1/2 inch. So I put that in, and then I use the pointy end of the stick to push the fabric into the tube. Pull the tube off, and then I can use the pointy end of the stick to get those corners out. So I press that, and that's like a flat point. It's barely a point. So let's see what happens with the one that we put the thread in. Give a gentle tug, making sure you're holding both sides of the thread. All right, when you feel like you have it out as good as that's going to get, then you're just going to grab one side of the thread and pull, and that's going to come right out. No one will ever know it was in there. So here's our comparison. This point is still a little bit curved, but there's just a lot of fabric in there for such a stark point. But it's definitely better than this one where we just sewed and clipped the curves. This one, look at how much better this point is than this one. So the lesson is the thread always helps. It's a little bit more work at the sewing machine, a little less work when turning, and a better result. But the tighter your point, the less you're going to have this perfect look. Let me know in the comments what you think, if this is something you think you're going to try, a little habit that you will get into, or if you think it is just not worth your effort. My name is Tara Reed. I'm an artist, a fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs, and I love to teach simple sewing tips, quilting tips, things to sew and sell, easy sewing projects, beginner quilting, etc. So be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you never miss a thing.